Got back from the fair, we were sitting here talking about it.
I did. I did.
Don't wear your white shoes.
I would not wear white shoes. I've seen it done before, and they usually come back pink.
Or your alligator boots, for that matter. We were talking about this, and Dan Crenshaw, who was on Fox News a few seconds ago, I think, from the 2nd District, Congressional District of Texas. He is in Mississippi. He's going to be on with Gerard Gibbert today at 11:20. So Dan Crenshaw will be there. But I noticed this he sent out yesterday on Twitter. Wanted to share this experience with y'all. This weekend, Tara and I visited the famous Neshoba County Fair. Neshoba County Fair, also known as Mississippi's Giant House Party. This is where Ronald Reagan kicked off his 1980 presidential campaign as soon as he received the Republican nomination. He also says, "I've never seen anything like it. It's hard to describe. You need to experience it for yourself." So,
and yesterday, before the horse racing started, he gave a little speech, and before he even spoke, Paul, he got a standing ovation at the Neshoba County Fair. So much deserved, and thank you for his service too.
Conservatism is appreciated no matter where it is across the country. All right, let's talk about this because the reverb from this, the reverberation across the country, certainly in some liberal bastions, they're shuddering to think what would happen with this one. But you've read it, and we're talking about the Attorney General, Lynn Fitch, requesting that the Supreme Court take a look at the Roe versus Wade itself.
Right.
Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, let me give some background to your listeners. They probably know this, but in 2018, the Mississippi Legislature passed H.R. 1510, which was called the Gestational Age Act. And basically what it did was in light of protecting the mother, the unborn child, and, frankly, the medical profession, it prohibited any abortions after 15 weeks, except for medical emergencies or abnormal severe fetal abnormality. And the reason it did that, Paul, it made a number of findings. 6 to 5 weeks in the womb, a baby has a heartbeat. 8 weeks, they start to have movement. 9 weeks, they already have teeth, they have eyes, they have genitalia. 10 weeks, they begin to feel pain. And so all these things, all these scientific discoveries, the development of science, led the legislature to say, you know what, this thing about Roe v. Wade, about pre-viability, meaning can the baby survive outside of the womb, that doesn't make any sense anymore. That Roe v. Wade was decided almost 50 years ago. Yeah. And today, with medical technology and science advancing the way it is, I mean, you could almost have a womb, a scientific womb, quote unquote womb, outside of the mother's womb, and you could raise a baby there, and so that means pre-viability is no longer an issue. At that point, viability is the moment of conception. So this structure that the Supreme Court created back in 1973 with Roe v. Wade just doesn't make any sense now, today, in light of the science, in light of the technology, in light of the change.
But it's not the changing science that this filing is based on, though.
No, well, the arguments in the legislature was on the changing science. Yeah. The arguments in the filing was based on simply abortion is not mentioned in the Constitution. The right to privacy, the way the Supreme Court made abortion a right in America in 1973 under Roe v. Wade was under this right to privacy. And the right to privacy came from the Supreme Court saying there are penumbras. I had to look that word up when I was in law school.
Do it one more time on that.
Penumbras. Which means basically when the Supreme Court back in 1973 and prior to that in a prior decision, they basically said, we're going to look at the Constitution, but we're also going to look at the spirit of the Constitution. We're going to look at all these things outside of the Constitution, and we're going to make up these rights. And that's basically where the constitutional right to abortion came from. And what the Attorney General is now saying is, look, we've got to get back to originalism, back to textualism. If you look at the text of the Constitution, if you look at the history of the Constitution, if you look at the structure of the Constitution, if you look at the tradition in America, there is no right to abortion. And that's what her brief says.
That seems so explicitly apparent. I mean, how did we make that giant leap if it wasn't for just cultural changes or politics itself?
Well, again, it goes back to the Supreme Court finding these rights that are not explicitly there in the Constitution.
Not only on this, on many different
exactly.
things.
And what has happened, and Paul, over the last 50 years, and the Attorney General makes this in her statement in her brief, is what has happened is the law has developed to such a degree that states can't even figure out what they can and cannot do because the law has changed so much.
Isn't that time limit you were talking about in the state of Mississippi was 15? But it's not the same. There are many states who have passed different rules and regulations or laws when viability is there, and that in itself is kind of confusing.
That's exactly right. And I will tell you that their brief also says that the United States of America is one of only 7 countries in the entire world that allows abortions to happen after, I think it's 20 weeks. And 75% of countries in the world do not allow those types of abortions to occur.
It really tears at me because if you are Christian, if you are a person who has any soul whatsoever or any heart whatsoever too, it's just, you think we as a human being are placing the terminology of viability.
Right.
At some point, and we're going to decide when a human is not a human. And as you said, you talked about how early on the heart is beating. And we're going to place viability after that? Prior to us placing that viability, in other words, at the stroke of midnight, it is viable.
Right.
2 seconds later, it's not a human.
That's exactly right. And think about this. I read recently, the analogy, the comparison to other laws that we have. We have laws criminalizing animal cruelty.
Yeah.
But we also have a Supreme Court precedent that says you can murder an unborn child in the womb.
At some point, it's almost like slavery. I had to say this. At some point, it is so... it is to a point where how long can that stand? And we've gone a long time.
Well, and
we've gone, what is it, 40 million, 50 million?
And the district court decision by Judge Reeves basically did the flip side of that, and Judge Reeves basically said that the legislature was gaslighting here, that the legislature has a history in Mississippi of putting people down, slavery, everything. He basically dredged up all the sins that have ever occurred in Mississippi and put it on this bill.
Well, you got to wonder because since the days of Margaret Sanger, and I've got some stuff on that one, since those days, how many African Americans, and I think it's around 14 or 15 million, which has relegated them now to the second, as far as minorities concerned, second in minority. I think Latino Americans are the number one minority now.
Well, I will tell you, there was an op-ed in the Clarion Ledger a few months ago. It was by a woman named Getty Israel. She started a center, or is starting a center here in the city of Jackson. Yeah. I think it's called Sisters in Birth. It's akin to the Centers for Pregnancy Choice, and basically what she said in her op-ed was in the last 5 years, in 2015 to 2019. There were almost 100,000 pregnancies among black women. And out of that, almost 100, and just in Mississippi. And out of that 100,000 pregnancies over that 5-year period, Paul, 17% were aborted. Almost 17,000 babies were aborted in that 5-year period just in Mississippi.
This has been through how many different areas? I mean, we got one abortion clinic in the entire state.
I'm looking at the op-ed, and I misspoke. It wasn't just in Mississippi. We only have 3 million people in Mississippi. It was throughout the nation. And in her op-ed, Paul, she said that, in the present Black Lives Matter era, there is no better benchmark to measure the value of black lives.
We got
this
more
is what a pro-choice African-American woman is saying about the issue of abortion.
And then the Margaret Sanger Award goes out to Hillary Clinton, goes out to Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is taking up the mantle of Margaret Sanger. They kept doing that award till recently, giving that award. Then you go back and you read some stuff on Margaret Sanger, and people don't know that. But that history has just been tainted. We'll have more coming up. What do you think the chances are of this getting to step 2? We will talk more with Mike Hurst coming up. I see Mike Hurst in the building, and we're talking about the Roe versus Wade. But the original, when it was passed, we were in a different environment. We were in an environment where women's rights was just beginning to a point, And there were people who were being forced, even if the mother died, they have to have the baby, or if there was some testimony that the baby was going to be deformed, or if it was rape and incest of a 14-year-old kid. And that's where it was. It took that jump to convenience real quick.
Right. And look, I'm all for women's rights. I have 4 daughters. But at the same time, Paul, we have to balance as a society the protection of life, the protection of a person. And again, you can either do that by, arguing that way on the protection of life. When does this baby come into existence? And we as conservatives believe that's the moment of conception. Yeah. But even if you don't buy into that, again, going back to the animal cruelty laws, we as a society have determined that as a legislature, our representatives can basically outlaw or prohibit things that we as citizens view as immoral. Harming an animal doesn't hurt a person, but we as a society have viewed animal cruelty as immoral, and we have outlawed that, yet we still allow abortions to take place.
What do you think the chances are that this will go to have any life at all?
Let me shake my my magic 8 ball here and see what it says. But I will tell you, with the current makeup of the court, I'm very optimistic because a little inside baseball, if you will, even if the court falls 5-4 with Justice Roberts going to the liberal wing of the court, we still have 5 other conservatives on the court that could overturn Roe v. Wade. And interestingly enough, that inside baseball, Paul, if that happens, if the Chief Justice goes to the liberal side of the wing of the court and decides that we should keep Roe v. Wade and keep abortion law, the other 5 Supreme Court justices, the conservatives, will rule that Roe v. Wade is overturned. And if that's the case, the justice with the most seniority on the majority side is Clarence Thomas. And so he decides either he can write the opinion or he can assign it to one of the other 4 Supreme justices.
No wonder they're worried about this.
That's exactly right. That's why liberals are losing their mind over this case.
Is there a possibility, and we were talking about this during the break, do you think there's a possibility the courts could find something in between, which would be, look, we're just going to throw this back to the states, and we'll let the states make that decision? Yeah,
absolutely. Because, under our form of government, our system of government, the states have those police powers. And if the Supreme Court goes back to the actual text of the Constitution and finds that the right to privacy, the right to an abortion is not in the text of the Constitution, absolutely.
When do you think this is going to be, they'll take this up? It's going to be this fall?
I think that's correct, yeah. I can't remember when they said that, but I think that's right.
Now, the one that's pending now, would that be in the summer decision and before the summer's out, or what?
No, actually, I think it would be next summer before they actually decided this.
Okay.
The story that decide any time they wanted to.
Got it. The story that I was looking for was San Francisco Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone. That's a famous
you probably know him, right?
Yeah. No. My godfather comes on the other side of the ledger. Whose archdiocese includes all the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's congressional district, issued a statement Thursday of last week rebuking Pelosi for a statement she made at a press conference explaining why she's pushing for federal funding of abortion. One of the things that they want to put in this bill, this transportation bill, was the federal funding of abortion, make everybody pay this. And we're talking about the Hyde Amendment, and it's just it doesn't need to be in there. And they know this, but this shows the heart and soul of these people. In explaining why she wants to repeal the Hyde Amendment and thus allowing federal funding of abortion, Pelosi told the reporter that it's because she is a devout Catholic. I know. It's like a slap in the face to everybody. As a devout Catholic and mother of 5 and 6 years, I feel that God blessed my husband and me with our beautiful family, 5 children in 6 years, almost to the day. How in the hell does she get away with this? Later that day, the Archbishop Cordileone put out a statement. It was headlined, let me repeat, "No one can claim to be a devout Catholic and condone the killing of innocent human life, let alone have the government pay for it. The right to life is fundamental." Nancy is the modern-day Margaret Sanger. And there are a lot of people, because this is not being taught in schools. Sanger Square is in Manhattan. It's still there. It's not torn down.
I can't believe they haven't renamed it.
Sanger's eugenics creed is clearly stated in her speech. She had a speech, it was My Way to Peace. This was 1932. Has anybody ever read this? Do they teach this in school? Does the NAACP put out pamphlets on this? The centerpiece of the program is vigorous state use of compulsory sterilization and segregation. The first class of people targeted for sterilization is made up of people with mental or physical disability. First step would be to control the intake and output of morons, mental defectives, and epileptics, she writes. The second step was referenced in a letter December the 10th, 1939, to one Clarence Gamble addressing African Americans. She said, the most successful educational approach to the Negro is through a religious appeal. We don't want the word to get out that we want to exterminate the Negro population, and the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members. In her autobiography, she proudly recounts her address to the Ku Klux Klan women in Silver Lake, New Jersey. Planned Parenthood, until recently, gave awards, and the awards went to people like Phil Donahue, Jane Fonda, Henry Morgenthaler, who was the father of unlimited abortion in Canada, former Supreme Court Justice Henry Blackmun, the author of the infamous Roe v. Wade, Hillary Clinton, and, yes, Nancy Pelosi.
In the name of Sanger.
In the name of Sanger. One of the most coveted awards you could get. And that's not taught in schools.
No, it's not.
Could I touch a couple stories before it's over on crime?
And let me say one last thing on abortion before we leave. If your listeners will recall, shortly after President Biden was inaugurated, he rescinded the Mexico City policy, which was a policy that we as Americans have, that we will not send funds to non-governmental organizations overseas that do abortions. Now we as a country that's no longer a prohibition.
Washington, D.C. Police Chief Robert Conte said during a Friday press conference that marijuana is undoubtedly connected to the rising crime in the city. And apparently this resonated with a lot of other police chiefs across the country. They're basically saying this, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but no longer can we overlook this. If you don't connect your state having liberal marijuana laws to the rise in crime, you're stupid. Police chief said that many people believe that marijuana is not really a big issue, but in reality, the drug undoubtedly is connected to violent crimes that we are seeing in our community. And in Washington, D.C., it's legal.
Right.
And the traffic out there and the murders and everything else, it hasn't gotten the illegal drugs off the street.
And I spoke, when I was still United States Attorney, I spoke with the U.S. Attorney in Colorado, where it's been legal for quite some time. And he relayed, because I told him what we were going through here in Mississippi, and he relayed the same statistics, that the crime rates were going up, property crimes in particularly were going up, DUIs, all that was increasing. And it started, the demarcation, if you look on a chart, started with the legalization of marijuana in Colorado.
You know, it does kind of stand to reason, too. Even on the legal market, if you've cultivated more clients out there, there's more need for marijuana. And then that line between getting it legal and illegal is kind of blurred.
Right.